My next guest is Matt Sherrill. He is a regional educational technology coordinator for the Learning Technology Center, serving Illinois' East Central region. Always an early adopter, Matt is passionate about utilizing technology to drive impactful learning and supporting federal educators as they grow fluent in new tech. An educator with 15 years of classroom experience, Matt previously worked as an ELA teacher and department chair in McLean County Unit 5 schools. Matt also holds a master's degree in teaching and learning and a technology specialist endorsement on his Illinois professional educator license. In addition to classroom work, Matt has served on his district's AI advisory team, where he developed and delivered AI focused professional development to the district staff. He has also shared his insights as a guest speaker on AI literacy for Illinois State University's pre-service teachers. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, let's start off with a question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, so it actually is kind of rooted in that AI
Mhm.
space, right? So I had taken an online graduate course on AI in education and experienced what I think a lot of educators experience when they start diving into it. I was really excited, but also really terrified. And there were times where I was feeling a little discouraged, maybe in our district or just looking around across the state on how little was being done to address that.
Mhm.
And so the way that I sort of found my way out of that was finding a good support network of like-minded people and starting to do the work that we wanted to see take place. So instead of lamenting that our district wasn't doing much to address this big topic, we got together and started doing the work within the district to address the topic. So just finding those like-minded individuals to build that support system and collaborate was really impactful.
Hmm. So you were an ELA teacher, as I mentioned, and department chair. What got you started working in ed tech?
Yeah, so I've always been drawn to the idea of technology being able to make me more efficient and or effective in my instruction. And so I was always interested in finding a new tool that could help me grow in those two areas and took on sort of an unofficial role within my building, kind of being a tech person for my colleagues. And after I got my master's, I was taking a series of online graduate classes just to advance on the salary schedule, and a lot of them were tech focused. And the interest started moving away from tools that could help me individually and more about just what does effective technology integration look like in a classroom. Learning about things like the SAMR model or the TPAC framework and those types of approaches to effectively using technology in the classroom that really started to grow in me and the interest to not just implement it in my own classroom, but to also offer that to colleagues and other teachers. And so as I continued down that path, and as I mentioned, I took one of those courses was on AI in education. And when I experienced that, we started doing some work in the district
Hmm.
and I realized the exponential impact that has. So when I first started teaching, I could impact the 120 students I saw every day come through my classroom. And then when I became a building chair for our department, then I was able to talk with colleagues and help make decisions and impact other classrooms within my building. And then when we started down this AI journey and I started doing more things on institute days and talking to the secondary teachers from across the district, I realized I was having an influence on classrooms outside of my building. And then an opportunity came up with a program of our State Board of Education that specializes in supporting K-12 teachers with all things ed tech. And so I realized my reach could go even beyond my own district. And so that desire kind of grew from a personal experience with technology in my own classroom to then seeing how the knowledge and experiences I had gained over my career could help impact classrooms across the state.
Hmm. So you talked a little bit about this working with others in your district. So you said while you were still in the classroom, was that when this AI advisory team was put together?
Yeah, so it it happened kind of organically. We being a building chair, I had a direct line to our director of secondary education, and so we came back from summer break, and I was talking to him about, my concerns and the urgency I saw around getting our staff and students educated on AI literacy specifically. And so, he said, well, let's have you do a breakout session for an institute day for all of the middle school teachers in the district. And, I started just kind of pointing to some key concepts and tools that could help teachers on their side of things. And then when we saw the receptiveness to that, when we saw the interest grow within the AI space in our district, um, I was part of another meeting with our tech coaches and trying to plan our next steps for our next institute day later that semester. And what we realized was we really needed to put together a team of a variety of stakeholders within the district to take a look at this and come up with a much more long-term, big picture idea and plan for our district in terms of AI. So that started in the fall of 23. In Originally, it was myself, our two tech coaches, and our director of secondary education. And then as it moved on, our team grew and grew. We started incorporating some of our library and media specialists, some tech teachers, some math teachers, um, and just getting different voices at the table as we started navigating, what does AI use look like in our district? What is our district's position going to be on this? And what guidelines do we have in place? And how are we going to get our teachers trained and get their own AI literacy developed so then they can help support students in their own AI literacy development?
Hmm. Hmm. And so after that, in your new role, what are you doing to help educators across Illinois?
Yeah, so my current role right now is within the Learning Technology Center of Illinois. So we cover a lot of different bases on all things ed tech. We have some people who specialize in more of the systems side of things. So they're doing cybersecurity assessments and free phishing campaigns for school districts. And we have technology coaches that get contracted out to different districts in the state. My particular role is I'm one of five people in our state that is in this role. And I kind of describe it as my three primary responsibilities are first, provide professional learning. So I'm going all over the state to different regional offices of education and specific school districts on institute days and early dismissals, and just providing training and workshops and professional development around all things technology. But right now, the hot topic is AI. So easily 95% of the events that I've been facilitating and leading have been AI focused. So that's my first primary responsibility. Second, um, I have 8 ROEs that are within my region where we host and I facilitate multiple networking meetings a year for each ROE. So we pull in tech directors and tech coaches and building admin who want to attend and just kind of provide a space for folks to collaborate and hear what other districts in their area are working on and be able to answer questions and support them in the work they're doing. And then finally, my third big responsibility is just to kind of be the point person for educators in my part of the state. So anything from I've had tech directors reach out saying, how do we get started with coming up with AI policy and guidelines? Like, where should we begin in this process? So I'll consult them on that. And then I also get emails from teachers just saying, hey, you were at our district. I have this idea for a project I want to do in my class. Do you have any tools you would recommend that could help with that? Or do you have any things that I should keep in mind while I plan this project?
Mhm.
So just kind of being that point person that people can reach out to so that even if I don't have the answer, I have enough relationships and connections that I can hook them up with somebody who does have the answer. So just everything I'm doing is to help those day to day in the trenches teachers, right? And supporting them with all things technology. But like I said, a big focus of that lately has been AI.
Hmm. Hmm. So we all know just I've just come off of going to two educational conferences as we're recording this in November, and there's a wide variety of teachers' knowledge on AI. And when you're at a conference breakout session, they'll usually do some type of a poll, and it's surprising to me that there's a lot of teachers who might know very little or have not used much AI yet, as we're about 2 years into Chat GPT having been released. So you talked a little bit about really finding out kind of where people are, having educated conversations with teachers. So how do you kind of navigate this? I mean, it is kind of a differentiation piece, but if you're doing something for a school and some teachers are using it a lot and really can navigate it well, and others are unaware, let's say blissfully ignorant, how do you build those PDs? And also when they are speaking a lot about concerns about students cheating with AI.
Yeah, so I would say the typical district, you're going to have about 10% of teachers who are actively and sometimes even aggressively opposed to any sort of AI talk and AI integration. And what I have found is oftentimes that's rooted in what their experience with AI has been. It's usually they see their students are using it to cheat and write their papers for them, and haven't really explored it much themselves. You do still have some in that bucket that have explored it, and they do have very valid concerns that I think we all should be paying attention to. But their approach is to then try to push against AI integration. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the 10% who are those early adopters, the ones who are using it personally, professionally, sometimes I have found even recklessly because they see all of the benefits and don't necessarily think of the potential pitfalls and the things like around data privacy and um, the ethical implications of how we're using AI. And then you have that 80% in the middle. And so what I try to do when I'm building PD is as much as possible target it to that 80% in the middle because they're the ones who maybe are aware of it but haven't really dug into it. They're open to the idea, but they just don't have time to explore it on their own. And so just trying to give that big picture view. So when I start every presentation workshop, I try to be very transparent with them that I see the benefits of AI. I think there's a lot of positive use cases in education for AI tools, but there are also aspects of it that are very concerning to me and terrify me, quite frankly. And so my goal isn't to try to get people on one end of the spectrum or the other, but more just trying to grow their understanding so they have a much more balanced view of that spectrum of how it can be used positively and the negative things that we should be keeping an eye out for. So that's a big thing. Another big part of the presentations I do that usually gets teachers to start paying attention is I call it my existential crisis slide. So we talk about, here are all of the current ways that AI is being used in malicious ways. And here are the things that can impact you just outside of the classroom and outside of your profession. And usually that's enough to get people shocked into paying attention when they hear about how easy it is for somebody to clone your voice and to make an AI say something where it sounds like you are the one saying it, and all of the ways that could go horribly wrong, right? So they start to realize this concept of AI literacy, it's not necessarily just about you using it yourself,
Mhm.
but being aware of how it's being used by others so that we can have a much more well-rounded understanding and be aware of how we need to stay on guard for potential malicious use. And
Mhm.
so that usually does a pretty good job of getting those teachers who have been ignoring it or have been kind of blissfully unaware, as you mentioned, to realize, oh, I need to actually start paying attention to this, not just for the sake of my students, but for the sake of me as a living person on this planet where this technology is being integrated more and more each day. So just trying to approach it from the foundational level of this is bigger than cheating. This is bigger than just AI in the classroom. Like this is a technology that is proliferating throughout every field and every industry. And so being aware of what it can do and becoming what we call AI literate is not only going to benefit you from a personal and professional standpoint, but also to help steer conversation. I think that's what a lot of teachers don't necessarily think of is, well, I'm not a tech person. That stuff doesn't apply to me. I don't need to know about all this AI stuff.
Mhm.
But then
Mhm.
when they start hearing about, here are the great use cases, here are the concerning things about AI, the more educated you are, the more of a voice you can have in the decision making process, not just at the district level, but in broader society as well. So it's really helpful, I found, to root it in teachers day to day. This is how it impacts what your job can look like, and the importance for our students to understand this, but then also to take it beyond the walls of the classroom. And that's when you start getting a little bit more buy-in.
Mhm. Mhm. So you came off recently of presenting in at the Illinois EdTech conference, and you had a session you mentioned called Upstream Efforts. Talk a little bit about it. Kind of is an offshoot of what we just been talking about, getting people to go in the same direction.
Yeah. I had the privilege, honestly, to co-present with one of the tech coaches who was on that AI advisory team in my previous district. And we spoke a lot about what we learned in that process of trying to get some AI professional development and decision making within our district. And, the things we learned that were beneficial and the things we learned that we probably would have done differently if we were to go back. So, um, it was a really, I think, insightful approach because we rooted it in this concept of self-determination theory.
Mhm.
And what that theory sort of poses is that there are three psychological requisites that need to be in place for somebody to be motivated or to buy in. And so the first one is they need to feel competent. They have to feel like they have the skills and understanding to be successful. The second is they have to have autonomy. They have to feel like they have voice and choice in the process. If everything is top down communication, you're not going to get a lot of buy in. And then finally, they need to have positive relatedness. So, building a positive community around whatever the effort is, highlighting the small victories and building on those, and just building a culture of positive collaboration around the topic. And so, we spoke a lot about how that influenced the way we rolled it out in our district, how we approached our AI policy, and how we communicated that with the staff in the district. And so it was really fun to have someone that I worked very closely with in that process last year, where we shared conceptually, here's kind of the roadmap of what you could be doing in your district. And then practically, here's what it looked like in our district. And here's what went well. Here's what kind of crashed and burned and what we would do differently. Um, and so just trying to give those districts that maybe have been a little slower to address this topic, giving them a foundation of knowledge and practical guidance on here's how you can get started and here's how it actually looks in the field. Here are real life examples from a district that lived this last year. So it was a lot of fun. We got a lot of positive feedback on it. And I'm sure I'm going to be presenting on that more and more in conferences in the future.
Hmm. And so you'll also be involved with this ed tech conference and kind of building a lot more sessions around AI, I would see in the future.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then in the bio, I mentioned as well that you're a guest speaker for AI literacy for the Illinois State University's pre-service teachers. How do you see talking to them? I mean, kind of similar to what you're already telling the teachers who are working in the buildings, but also as they go into their student teaching, what they should be knowledgeable about.
Yeah, that I love guest speaking at the university. It's interesting because there's a lot of things that regardless of years of experience in education, there are some things that are common from pre-service teachers to 20 plus year veterans. A lot of that being the different concerns and the different excitements around AI in education. But one thing that I really do try to stress to those pre-service teachers in particular is once you kind of learn the basics of how AI works. So, how does ChatGPT, based on this sentence you plug into the prompt, how does it come up with the text it comes up with? And so, understanding the limitations of AI in that way is eye-opening for a lot of them. And one of the biggest limitations is this idea of hallucinations, right? For those who don't know, AI can just make stuff up, right? It's become really good at mimicking human language and replicating patterns in how that language is used. But it can then generate information that is just false or kind of goes off the rails a little bit. So, talking with pre service teachers in particular, the temptation is to let AI do a lot of the work that you don't feel confident in yourself.
Yeah.
Because if I don't fully understand this topic, maybe AI can help me. And that's true to an extent. But if you don't have the competence in that area, you run the risk of overlooking key hallucinations and factual inaccuracies and kind of learning about the topic in a way that's skewed. And so the big thing we talk about is that 80-20 rule, right? Let AI do 80% of the heavy lifting for you, but then the 20% is you using your content expertise, your expertise of your students to then fine tune it. So, an example I often use is a great time saving feature of AI is let it create the rubric for you instead of sitting and formatting and coming up with the descriptors and criterion and the point values and all of that. You can go to a tool like a Magic School, give it the grade level, the standards, a description of the assignment, and it's going to give you a really solid starting point for a rubric. So that's the 80%. The 20% is now I need to use my expertise of looking at this and evaluating, does this rubric assess what I'm intending it to assess? Is this rubric written in a way that's accessible to my students? And if you don't have that expertise built up, you can't do the fine tuning and you can't ensure that it's being used in pedagogically sound ways. And so, the big message I have for those pre service teachers in particular is don't offload the learning process
Mhm.
onto the AI. You still learn what you need to be a strong, impactful educator that's rooted in best practices and solid learning theory. And then once you have that foundation, then let the AI kind of do some of the heavy lifting on those day-to-day tasks, and you can feel confident that you're going to be able to fine tune it accordingly and responsibly. But if we have pre-service teachers who, aren't very well versed in assessment practices and best practices when it comes to assessing student learning,
Mhm.
they run the risk of having using AI in a way that's going to be ineffective at best
Mhm.
and harmful at worst. So, just making sure we're not letting AI replace our own expertise, let it amplify your existing expertise.
Yeah, that's really important. Having it amplify what they know, but like not using it as a crutch for what they don't know and trusting it. I think that's the key is not trusting it too much because of those errors and yeah, a lot of what can go wrong. And I think, having a class, having speakers speak on that, making sure that pre-service teachers at all the universities are aware of that. Doing something like rubric, maybe lesson plan outlines are good, but yeah, using your brain for the other part, right? So,
Yep,
um,
absolutely.
talk to me a little bit about some upcoming trainings or webinars that you'll have in the spring. You talked to me about an AI summit in Central Illinois. What are some plans that you have for those?
Yeah, so the organization I work for, like I said, is a program of the State Board of Education. And so this year, when they provided the funding for our program, there was the request and the stipulation of hosting these larger AI focused events in different parts of the state to give as many people and as many educators access to that. So we've been doing a series of these around the state, and coming up in the spring will be the one in my region where I currently live in central Illinois. And so what we try to do is, give it sort of a mini conference feel. We have a keynote on some best practices around AI, and then we'll have a series of breakout sessions, and they're all AI focused in some regards. So there will be some sessions on specifically for administrators on how do we navigate decision making around policy and guidelines and all of that with AI. We have some practical ones for teachers day to day. How can we leverage AI to accelerate our differentiation practices, and how do we leverage AI to take what we know to be effective within education and make aspects of it more efficient. And so it kind of runs the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Uh, there will be some sessions on specific tools. There will be some sessions on what this looks like in the classroom. How do we start these conversations of AI literacy with our students? When do we start those conversations? How does this sort of get folded into our existing curriculum? So just lots of different topics, but they're all AI focused in some regard. And it's just a full day event that educators can come to and hear from a lot of great speakers and thought leaders around uh, AI in the education space.
And sometimes you're tying these into the early dismissal days or institute PD days in those districts to lessen the load on the a need for sub coverage as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something we found is traditionally we would host more events at the regional offices of education for then districts to send their teachers to, but with the sub shortage and all of how it's so much harder to miss a day of school now as a teacher than it was before, um, we've noticed many more districts are wanting us to come into their specific institute days and early dismissals. So um, it's definitely given me an opportunity to see a lot of different districts and uh, the different steps they're at in the process of this conversation around AI.
Hmm. Well, we've had a great conversation about your work leading from being a department chair in ELA to working in your district and at your school with tech tools and now working for the State Department of Ed. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think the biggest thing is AI technology, it's evolving so fast and it can feel like drinking from a fire hose when you start paying attention to it. But the biggest thing to remember is building that AI literacy is going to be extremely important for all things. It's going to be important for you personally in navigating an increasingly AI influenced world. It's going to be very important to allow you to have educated and impactful conversations with students around AI use. And it's also going to be what helps steer decision making at the government level, at the community level, in terms of how we are implementing AI in our lives. So the more you can build that literacy, Ethan Malik, he's a professor out of the Wharton School of Business. He's a big voice in the practical side of AI use.
Hmm.
And he recommends, 10 plus hours of hands-on time with AI tools is kind of what's necessary to really get a good grasp on what is this technology capable of? What does it do well? What does it not do well? And so just building that AI literacy through hands-on use and exploration is going to be really important in steering this conversation within your classroom, your district, your community, and beyond.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
Yeah, so if you go to ltcillinois.org, that'll take you to the website for the organization that I work for.
Mhm.
And you can find my contact information on there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can always email me. Like I said, part of my job is to be that point person for educators. So whether you're in my region or not even in my state, you can always feel free to email me, ask me questions. I'm very, very happy and always excited to talk about this with educators who are interested in exploring technology in general, but specifically AI. So, don't hesitate to reach out. This is what I love to do. And my wife appreciates it when I talk with other people because then I don't talk her ear off about it quite so much at home.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure learning more about your work in helping educators learn more about AI and also the pitfalls they can fall into when they don't use it in a way that will help improve their work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.